we've been making assumptions since we were very small. That's all a perception. And that's all incredibly unique to each one of us. Our lived experience forms our perception so that our brain can categorize those things and make it make sense faster. Yeah, I'm just going to do this. You know what they say about assumptions, right? An assumption makes an ass out of you and me. Assume the letters, you know? And then, of course, there's the scene from the movie Office Space where the dude creates a jump to conclusions mat. The concept of jumping to conclusions. Assumptions. We make assumptions when we don't have all the information about something. We make an assumption to try to complete the picture, to try to make it make sense to us. Because when things make sense to us, we understand them and therefore allow them to be, and that gives us a feeling of safety. Did you know that our eyes, our human eyes, your eyes, each one has a blind spot, a spot where there's literally no, the optic nerve ends there, and the optic nerve is not receiving any information from this part of our field of vision. And I first read about this in one of the brain books or body books that my daughter and I read. I looked it up to be able to explain it to you guys here with, legit words and make it make sense. The point where your optic nerves converge to exit the eye and into the brain is known as the optic disc. This area of the eye has no light-sensitive cells to detect light rays. So there's no light-sensitive cells there to even detect light, which is what we see is via light. The result in this is a break in the visual field known as your blind spot. And I will link this below because there's a little exercise that you can do. There's a dot and there's a cross over here. And as you get closer to the dot, there's a point where you can't see the cross. And all you see is a field of white. Because what our brain does with this small spot of lack of information is it takes the information around it and assumes what is there. It takes the information around it, which is just all white, and fills in the blanks to create the whole picture. And when I read this one night when my daughter and I were reading a book, I was like, oh my God, that's what our brain does in lots of situations when we don't have the full picture, which is actually literally every situation. We can never have all of the information. Like each one of us, I can never know all of the information of anyone else's situation. Even looking back on my own past and events that have happened in the past, or, things that stand out to me or whatever, and I look back at them now from my perception at this moment, and I look back and I'm like, wow, I view it differently now. So I can look back at events from my own past where I was the main character in that story, and I can look at it now with my perception of how I've grown and things that I've learned and things since then, and I now view it differently because I have more information. So even though I was the person there was information that I didn't have available at the time. So examples of this. You text a friend about getting together this weekend and she doesn't answer. And after a day goes by, you're like, why isn't she answering me? Is she mad at me? Did I do something? Or then the next day goes by and you're no longer thinking like, oh, I did something and she's mad at me, but it's more like, is she okay? Did something happen? But then you see that she's posted something on social media and you're like, okay, she's live, but why isn't she texting me back? And then our brains start to try to complete the picture. So all you know is that you reached out to a friend and she didn't get back to you. That's really like the basic information, right? You reached out, she hasn't responded. And our brain is like, but why? But why? But why? I want to know. I want to know. I want to understand. I need to make this make sense. And I'm going to make the leap that I want to make it make sense for it to be okay, for me to accept what's going on here. Another example, very vague example, would be you go to the grocery store and the cashier is it's just not very polite, not very nice, and maybe even a little nasty. And you walk out of there and you're like, what did I do to him? Well, you didn't do anything to him. That wasn't about you. That person is having a bad day, maybe. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're having a bad week. Maybe they're having a bad year. Maybe everything just sucks for them right now. Maybe they got in a car accident. Maybe their kid is at home sick. Maybe they can't pay their bills. Maybe their feet hurt. Maybe they have a really bad headache. Maybe they feel like they're actually going to throw up. Maybe they hate their job. Like, maybe their parents are sick, or their mom is sick, or their dad died last week. Like, you literally have no idea, but whatever their behavior towards you was has nothing to do with you, especially in the situation where it's like two strangers, right? But we do this even in close relationships, even partnerships, marriages, friendships, families. We make these assumptions about things, trying to complete the picture. And our brain does this in general because as we grow and as we learn, the way that our mind functions is that there's literally there's so much information around us at any given time that our brain kind of categorizes things. And all of it's very personal and all of it's very unique in what our experiences are for each one of us. Because there can also be like, oh, a dog bit me when I was 3, and my brain's like, dog's dangerous. And then at 6 years old, maybe you encounter another dog and it's aggressive too. And your brain's like, remember that other dog? Dangerous. And then you like don't want anything to do with dogs. So then you turn into, a 50-year-old person that's like, oh, I don't like dogs. I never go around dogs. They make me uncomfortable. I'm scared of them. And that's, your brain has had limited experiences with dogs and has categorized it based on what your experience was, what your feeling was in those events. Okay? Not that not all dogs are bad. Some dogs can be aggressive. Some dogs are literally breathing stuffed animals that are like the cuddliest thing ever, right? And so you may have this experience with dogs, and your neighbor loves dogs because they've had mostly good experiences with them. Maybe they've had 500 different experiences with the dogs, and maybe 5 of them were iffy, but the other 495 experiences with dogs were great. So they love dogs. And that's where our lived experience forms our perception. And then that works with our brain to categorize things and make assumptions about a situation or a scene or like literally anything to make it make sense for us. Because that making sense completes the picture, makes sense, I understand, and then there's this sense of safety there that comes from that because you have this knowing of what to expect from it. But that's all a perception. And that's all incredibly unique to each one of us. So back to this thing about assumptions. So there's this very natural process that is literally the way that our mind works because we can't be processing these billions of pieces of information all the time for the first time because that's like way too much. So to make our processing more efficient, our brain categorizes these things. So that's very natural, biological, neurological, a process that our brain does. But then there's another step that's more emotional, even more of a perception issue. Not issue, but a way to explain it, a way to look at it. Going back to, I texted my friend and she didn't answer me. What that then triggers in each one of us is going to be different. If we have wounds of rejection and abandonment, we may have is she mad at me? Did I do something wrong? Is it my fault? Or another reaction would be like, well, if she cared, she would answer. So we're taking it personally that this person didn't respond back. And then there's the, I hope she's okay. I hope nothing happened. I hope everybody's okay. So you're worried that something's wrong. Those three things could be true, or it could just be that she's busy, or maybe she's not feeling well and she couldn't get to the phone, or maybe something has happened where she's just not been able to respond, or maybe she wanted to respond but didn't respond right away, but then like time had passed and then it was awkward and then she like felt bad that she didn't respond, and then she's like, oh, it's going to be really weird when I reach out because I'll be like, hey, do I act like nothing happened and it hasn't been 3 days since you texted me back, or do I act like, oh, I'm sorry and apologize for not, there's it gets weighted. It can get weighted. All of that on both sides of that situation, right, is our mind making assumptions to try to make something make sense. And expectations also play into that too, because when we text a friend, there is an expectation that they're going to text back. And some of us have expectations around that, like they'll text back immediately, they'll text back as soon as they see it, they'll text back tonight when I know that they're sitting on the couch, or tomorrow morning, or something like that. We have these expectations around someone else's response to something as well. And this is just one example. So the question becomes, when are the assumptions that our brain makes simply to make our brain work more efficiently, biologically, neurologically? And when are the assumptions that we're making not in recognition that there's a billion things that we don't know, and when they are jumping to conclusions and thinking that we know what's going on when there's literally no way for us to know that, and when it's us taking things personally and our inner wounds, our programming, our conditioning, the things that we've experienced throughout our life that result in these default thought patterns, when are those activated? And is this all helpful? Is it a beneficial use of our energy? Is it triggering for our emotions in a way that is beneficial or makes sense? And from what I've experienced in my past, different versions of myself in this same lifetime, and sometimes now I'm at least aware of it when I do it. But I recognize that in any given situation, whether it's someone that hasn't texted me back, or someone sends me a message that seems emotionally charged, or someone said that they would do something and they didn't, or I've been waiting on something from somebody, or someone reacts with anger to something that I said, and my mind is, like, what did I do? And now in those moments, I can realize that there's a billion things that I don't know. And there's a billion things that that person may not even know about themselves, about their own reactions to the things. So it's a separation. It's an acknowledgement that these are the way that our brains work. It's an acknowledgement of all of these pieces that play into our each individual perception, which colors, like lenses in glasses, the way that we view anything external from ourselves. A conversation, an interaction, a phone call, an event, an argument between two other people, or whatever. And our own experience is the perception in which we each view the things that happen outside of us and that we are actually included in as well. And when I'm looking at that, and if it has nothing to do with me, I let it go. And I don't sit there and ruminate on it, and I don't sit there and try to figure it out, because I recognize that it has nothing to do with me, and that is not a beneficial use of my time and energy. I also recognize that there's a billion things that I can't know. So there's a lot of information about the situation that I don't even have available to make an informed judgment or decision or opinion about anything. So both of those two things paired together brings me peace. Hi, I want to interject here and give you some steps that can assist you in unpacking this assuming an assumption situation in your everyday life. Step 1, cultivate an awareness. Create an awareness. Increase your level of self-awareness of yourself, your thoughts, and your actions, and where your mind is going. This level of awareness will help you catch those moments of judgment and assumption, and then you can choose how to respond. And you can choose to respond with number 2, pause. Catch it, pause, and take a breath. Number 3, ask yourself, do I have all the information? Do I know all the information? What don't I know? Could there be things that I don't know about the situation? Step 4, am I taking this personally? Ask yourself, am I taking this personally? Am I taking the actions and behaviors and words or lack thereof of someone else? Am I taking it personally? What am I making it mean about myself? What am I making it mean? Am I taking it personally? Step 5, ask yourself, am I just being nosy? Am I being curious? Am I inserting myself into a situation that has nothing to do with me? Does this matter to me and my family, my situation? Does it matter? Is it worth my time and energy and thoughts and brain space to give to this situation, to even sit here thinking of all the possibilities? Is it worth my time? Is it bringing me peace? You can ask yourself that. Is this bringing me peace? 6, ask yourself, is this important? Is this important to me? Because sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, no, I need to know this because of this. Or I need to talk to this person because of this. This person is important to me. This relationship is important to me. I seek to understand what's happening here. Other times, it has nothing to do with you and it won't ever impact your life in any way, and it's not worth it. And in those situations is number 7, which is release it. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Don't allow it to take up space in your mind anymore. Inside of your energy, inside of your body, inside of your thoughts. If it's not worth it, if it's not worth your peace, choose to let it go. To instill this pattern, this new default pattern, your level of self-awareness in these moments of judgment and assumption in your life, examination and investigation, and self-reflection is something you desire to increase your perception peace. Check out the recording made especially for this podcast by Inner Sunshine Hypnotherapy, my company. The link is in the description below. If you're listening on the podcast, use the code PODCAST50 to get it half off. It'll just be $5. We greatly appreciate your support. Now let's finish the show. So the question is, these assumptions that we make and this needing to know, the needing to complete the picture, the desire to understand so that something makes sense. Because when something makes sense, we feel safe with it. And when something doesn't make sense, it's like, it doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why they're doing that. I don't know why you're doing that. I don't know why you're talking to me like this. I don't know why that person was like that. I don't know why this happened. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. And therefore, scary. It feels unsafe. And it's an unpacking of that. Why does that not feel safe for me? And does this actually have anything to do with me? Oftentimes, most of the time, it has nothing to do with you. Therefore, it has no actual implication on your safety. Many of you are probably familiar with the book, The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz, but agreement number 3 is actually don't make assumptions. But there's a level of awareness that has to happen first because we are making these assumptions. We've been making assumptions since we were since we were very small. We've been making assumptions based on our limited amount of information. When, if we're 3 years old and mommy comes home from work and she's had a bad day, she might snap and get frustrated if if a mess is made. Okay, that's not because the child is a bad child and making messes are bad, which the child might be like, I don't know why mommy's yelling at me. Am I a bad kid? That type of thing. If that's the type of language structure that child grows up with, when the mom's reaction actually had nothing to do with the child and the mess, it had to do with her having a bad day and being a little low on patience, and maybe she needs to recharge. Maybe she needs to take a couple of minutes and regulate her nervous system. But we've been making these assumptions based on the limited amount of information that we have about anything our entire lives. So when we get to this point of healing and going through this kind of unpacking journey, unpacking the stuff that we've picked up our entire life through all of our experiences, and unlearning some things and looking at it and being like, what is this? Why do I have it? And do I need it? Do I want it? And is it benefiting me? How has it been benefiting me? And can I do this, achieve this in some other way? And we start to leave things behind. We let it go. And then it becomes something that we used to do. And this is how we walk towards creating an intentional life and creating intentional thought patterns, default thought patterns, behaviors, actions, and all of these things combine to create our reality. And I believe that it brings peace. And this is just one of the pieces. Peace. In this series, I will be walking us through different concepts, different aspects, different metaphors and teachings, and all of the things, all of the different pieces of this human experience. Because I believe what we all want is peace, and that we all have a lived experience of things that impede that feeling of peace. Many, many pieces. Thank you for joining me today on this very first episode, and I look forward to many, many more piece by pieces.